freight efficiency with NACV's Mike Roth and friends.
Here in episode 103, we have Yann Kulp. He's Director of Sales for the United States for Driivz, where we talk about the two ways of looking at transportation, his definition of EV suitability, and the benefits of being tactical. He also explains what Driivz is and encourages fleets to begin taking baby steps and look for use cases for battery electric vehicles. Today we have joining us Yann Kulp. Yann's Director of Sales in the USA at Driivz. We're going to hear what Driivz is in a few minutes. I'm really excited to chat with you today, Yann. Thanks for joining us.
You bet, Mike. I've been a big fan of NACV for quite a few years now, and I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, so I always ask, my guests how we became friends. Done it 102 times, so you have to answer the question here in a minute, Yann. But when you worked with myself and Dave Schaller and others at NACV, I could tell you were a cheerleader for what we were doing. But so thank you for that. I appreciate it. And
you bet.
Okay, here's the question: do you remember when we met and became friends?
I'm sorry, I don't. It must have been at an ACT Expo. I don't recall, or maybe when I was trying to get maybe a sponsorship for NACV a couple of years back. Do you remember?
The easy answer, which is probably true, is it was at some event. You have a very positive attitude. You take things on with robust passion, and so I'll say this. Wherever it was, I didn't forget you.
Well, I think what I really enjoyed immediately from both of you and your team is your passion for really getting into the day-to-day life and nitty-gritty of fleets where they are in real life. And I think you can end up with a bit of a, like a technocratic bubble of folks who are in the Bay Area, who are software engineers. And, I work with a lot of them. I love them, right? But you really have to understand the day-to-day life of a guy who is running, fleet operations 24/7, who has a mission critical, food delivery business or delivering kids if it's school buses. And if you don't have the empathy and attention to their needs, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So, I've said this many times, there's a concept in Japan called Gemba. And it basically it's translated into go and see. I mean, just go, walk in the shoes of the people you're trying to work with and understand their challenges. Now, we're learning, and with electric vehicle deployments, we're learning that they're likely going to have to change their operations some. So it's even more important to understand what their life is about and how they operate trucks, how to deliver all these goods, like you're saying, so that we can best help them with maybe adaptions or changes to their operations. What excites you about being in the trucking space, Yann?
Yeah, so maybe like a lot of guys, it's serendipity. I don't think for most people, you don't sort of, in high school or college and say, I want to get into this. Maybe more recently, but certainly not at my age. I was working for a company called Schneider Electric. They own the Square D brand here in the US, big, energy tech player. And in 2017, I was working for the senior VP of strategy for North America, and they had a bunch of questions around EV charging, right? Is this a good business? Should we keep on doing it? What are the economics? Where should we focus our efforts, et cetera? And so I really started spending a lot of time in the industry, talking to software and hardware players, talking to fleets, talking to customers. And I really started realizing that there are two ways of looking at transportation. There is the consumer side, which is, of course, the vast majority of vehicles on the road in the US. But then there is also this thing that, if you're not in the industry, you don't think about, which is the fleet side. And I got very excited about this because at the time, there wasn't a lot of attention to decarbonizing fleets. I'm not discounting RNG and CNG and other clean technologies, but certainly in electrification, it was pretty new. And so I started working on that. And I realized that there was really an opportunity to help fleets make decisions, because it's really hard consumers, I love saying this, consumers can make irrational decisions because some of us buy BMWs or, SUVs that you don't need. You can make
Yep.
decisions for fun and because you just want to. But if you're a fleet, you're making hard-nosed operational and financial decisions. And in an electrification world, that's super complex, right? You have thousands of vehicles, you have millions of data points, you have different sites, different energy costs, blah, blah, blah. And so creating software that models that really struck me as being an interesting opportunity. And so I, co-founded a startup and so now it's been, close to 7, 8 years now that I've been in this space.
Yeah, so I think what you said, I find really interesting. I think the fact that trucks are tools and, there can be more, techno analysis, RMI calls it, or like,
Hmm?
using real data to drive decision making. You can almost make a computer make a decision when you're in that mode versus, you know what, I want this, ultimate driving machine of a BMW, or I want this, or I want that
Right.
gets more of an emotional purchase. But I see that as like a two-headed coin where, one side is, okay, great. Now we know how decisions are made and it's made on, tenths of a cent per mile, operating costs, or this, that, and the other. And so that's a great thing. And then
Mm,
you go try to do that, particularly with transformative technologies like electric, where now,
mm,
okay, I can't just pull in and gas up. I need charging infrastructure. And now I'm, range limited, and now dwell time is important. And where do I put the
mhm,
chargers? And so I remember early on in my work on electric vehicles, somebody said, well, this is going to be the most complex financial modeling that a fleet's ever have done to try to
mhm.
confirm a purchase. And I agree. So it's like a two-headed coin, I think, a little bit. I mean, it's great that they're purchasing by facts, but being able to really document that is a huge challenge or really hard.
It is, and I think what's incredibly difficult, and we spent so much time with fleets. We in our startup we did some really cool early work with Anheuser-Busch and Pepsi, and Ecolab and a few others, and it is that there is no data history in the EV world, right? So with traditional fueling, there is a history of residual value of vehicles. There is a history of maintenance. There's a history of fuel cost, although they can vary, but there is a history of maintenance, and all of these give you a track record. But when it comes to EV, I mean, things are changing. But at the time, certainly, it was all very hypothetical, right? Like, well, yes, on paper, maintenance will be half. On paper, your range
Yeah.
will be X. And it's really hard for a fleet leader to make decisions that you can really go and look at a senior executive and look at them in the eye and say, okay, I believe this is going to work. The journey is really more using data to come up with models of feasibility, identify low-hanging fruit, and feel comfortable about executing on the low-hanging fruit or the easiest of the easy as a way to start the journey versus being stuck in analysis paralysis
Yeah.
and never being able to emerge into testing mode.
Yeah, and with respect to the new technology, so battery electric trucks we're talking about here,
Mm,
by the time you understand some of these and have confidence in some of these performance numbers, the technology's changed as well. So, we always get the question, will I have to replace the battery pack in the life of the truck? And so, we went, some of the NACV team, we went and looked at,
mm,
okay, well, what's the current, experience with cars? And they said, well, uh, some passenger cars that were built 6 to 8 years ago are showing that they don't need a battery replacement. And then they quickly said, and that was the battery and the battery management system of 10, 12 years ago
yep.
when we
Yep.
designed. And now we're worlds better with respect to, lifetime and this, that, and the
Mhm.
other than we were. So my point is that, the technology is changing fast too. So what we learn is really on an earlier technology, and maybe things got better, maybe they got worse. So we got that operating as well. How do you think about that or approach that?
I mean, two thoughts. One of our early clients, which I won't name, but was a large package delivery fleet with an OEM, and if you look at the data set that they gave us, the distribution of their daily routes really demonstrated that maybe like 95% of their routes are under 75 miles a day. And so, you think about that and say, okay, and then you look at the distribution of what it might look like in New York versus Nebraska, right? And you say, well, even if batteries degrade, there are use cases where the daily driving pattern is 30 miles and the others where it's 300 miles. And so even if a battery degrades over time, it doesn't mean you have to replace it. Maybe you have to reposition the vehicle. But there are a lot of consumer and fleet use cases where even a degraded battery is completely feasible. The other point is, like, if I had waited for iPhone 16, whatever iteration we're on now, to come out before making a decision to move to a smartphone, I'd be a dinosaur, right? And so I think there's real value in saying, does a particular vehicle and a particular charger in a particular location with a particular energy cost make economic and operational sense for me today, with the assumptions of battery degradation and residual values? But does it make economic sense for me today to convert? And if that's the case, then there is a rationale to do it. And if in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, there is a better vehicle and a better charger that comes out, then in the natural cycle of my fleet, I will replace the existing EVs and I'll put in new ones.
You're kind of adjusting your plan versus starting from scratch. So,
Yeah.
we always encourage people, if you've got some pickup trucks around your depot, go make them electric, or your yard tractors. Just get started so that you can, start to build that financial model, that you look at. As we were at a Run on Less Depot a few years ago, and the parts guys were fighting over driving the little pickup or van that they were using to go get parts. So so that will start the light, if they are, that starts the light switch around a fleet as to, okay, well, how am I approaching my driver attraction if I get into electric vehicles and so forth? So I remember you telling me that you had analyzed a whole bunch of fleet vehicles during those days around EV suitability. So how did you define EV suitability?
From start to sometime middle of this year, we ran analytics for over 350,000 vehicles. So suitability of 350,000 internal combustion vehicles to convert to EV. And we really focused the analytics on the critical decision variables for a fleet and the different stakeholders. So one of them is looking at operational feasibility. Is there a reasonable probability, data-driven, that the vehicle will work? Is there enough dwell time? Is there enough power capacity at the facility? Looking at battery degradation over the ownership period of 3, 5, 7 years, cold weather impact, and packaging all of that. And the fundamental question is, will the EV do the job? Right? That's the first one. Nothing else matters if it doesn't work. Then the second one is economic impact, based on the assumptions of any energy cost and maintenance impact and residual value and infrastructure cost build out. What are the economic impacts of doing this? The third one is around sustainability. What is the carbon impact? Because charging energy or electricity in certain states is not the same as in others. And then the fourth is around the required infrastructure. What is the charging environment that is required to ensure that those vehicles are working? So really, you're addressing the needs of the VP of infrastructure and facilities, the VP of fleet, the CFO, and the chief sustainability officer.
And it really starts right away. I mean, so diesel or gas vehicles, you may have had different groups of trucks or different groups of vehicles at different duty cycles and routes, but all that meant was you were returning for gasoline or diesel maybe every other day versus every 4 days or 5 days. Now it's big, right? So I think what we're seeing is there are a lot of trucks within the fleet, within any fleet, that can be electrified. Now, there are some, pretty homogeneous fleets that maybe only do long haul or only do LTL, but a lot of them we're finding have, days and routes. So there are groups of vehicles that can be electrified today in most fleets, definitely if they're running smaller vehicles. I want to get to Driivz. So
Yeah.
tell us about what is the company and what are you doing?
It's astonishing. Driivz is not incredibly well known, but this organization is 12 years old. We are a charger management software company, and we are kind of the 800-pound gorilla in this space globally. So we have, by then this year, within a couple of weeks, we're going to have over 140,000 chargers operating on our back-end software, and in 38 countries, right? So we operate the largest charging networks on 4 continents. Granted, we started in Europe because that's where things were happening 12 years ago more than the US. But in the US, we work with EVgo or Green Lane or Circle K, Volvo Trucks, right? There's a lot of these large fleet or public charging clients that use our management software. When I explain this to family or friends who are not in the business, you say, a charger is a laptop, right? It's a computer. And like all computers, there are issues. So you need to run all of these pieces of software or piece of electronics with a really high level of uptime. And so we have a lot of tools around commissioning and onboarding of new chargers and managing them and providing alert management systems and O&M, capabilities that maintain these chargers at 99.9% uptime. And whether you're a public charging or a fleet, your clients or your vehicles depend on the uptime of the charger. And so we're really, really good, at doing that. We have energy management. We manage billing for clients. So when somebody does a credit card payment processing, we do that. We have apps for drivers. We have apps and tools for the facility manager and the fleet managers, a bunch of things in here. But it's a really large organization.
We don't know a lot yet as an industry about how all this is going to shake out, particularly with some of this, but we know we need reliable charging, right? Just like we expect to get diesel fuel when we pull into either a behind the fence on-site fueling or public based. So we need to have that reliability and durability very high, quickly. And then, just making all the other business processes around it, simple and usable, because I think that's one of the things that, Yann Park from my team on it, he recorded a podcast not too long ago. And, I asked him about change and technology change. And he says, the change that sticks are the ones that are simple. And that you can manage. What excites you about the next 6 or 8 months there? And you got any fun things that you want to share with us? Any cool customers or any projects you're working on?
Yeah, well, first, I'm a sales guy, right? So I love to sell, and I really enjoy it when we find customers who have pain points that we can solve. And one of the things I'm really excited about, and which I see, is that when organizations go from a dozen chargers or some pilot scope to large scale, I love metaphors. It's like having 3 kids at home or running a boarding school. That's not the same business, right? And it's the same thing here. Having a dozen chargers and running a pilot is not the same thing as committing significant parts of your operation to a new powertrain, right? And a new energy source. And so they need completely different robust systems. And so I find that really exciting. The other thing I find interesting is that our clients are growing really fast. over the course of this year, our business is growing extremely fast and remains so, and that's interesting, right? Because there's a lot of concerns or discussion at least around what would a new administration do to electrification. But I think that in Europe, in North America, a lot of the folks who are already committed to decarbonizing their operations are not. They may change the speed at which they change, but they're not going to change their trajectory.
From your chair and having done
Yeah.
this for maybe 10 years, I mean, what's your advice for all of us out there, given, of course, that there's going to be ups and downs and days that we're optimistic and days we're pessimistic, but how do we work through this as an organization?
I really believe in the concept of being tactical and not strategic. And I'll explain. Fundamentally, that trying to predict what the future is and create a strategy around it is a bit of a fool's errand. I really enjoy being very tactical in a sense. Let's go and build something and let's go and run with it. So, take baby steps, figure out some use cases depending on where the fleet is at, and go and build things and go and run things. You will learn from mistakes. Things are not easy. If humanity was full of architects who were planning homes, we'd still be living in caves. I really like builders who are trying new things and willing to deal with the pain of it. But that's how humanity progresses.
I think it comes back to what one of us mentioned earlier, and that is it's easier to adjust a plan than create one. So get started. Will it cost you something? Yeah. Will you make some mistakes? Yeah. But it's going to give you the chance to be what many people want to be, and that's fast followers. You're not going to be a fast follower without doing something quick.
Yeah.
This is too hard.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you try to be a fast follower, but you haven't already learned the basics of construction and procurement and managing vehicles, EVs, then it's going to be really hard to be a fast follower because the expertise gap is going to be really large. And so if you don't have some muscle memory that is being built right now, I think it's going to be really hard to catch up.
Yeah. Hey, Yann, thank you so much. This has been really interesting. And good luck with Driivz. I'm excited about it. We'll hear more, but thanks for joining me.
You bet.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.